celebration of Garfield Show Season 3 being released on Netflix, I decided to make this video about Garfield. Yeah. Garfield is a series about the original funny cat and follows the nihilistic and possibly racist Garfield, his pathetic owner John Arbuckle, John's roommate Lyman, and Lyman's dog Odie. Throughout the series, we bear witness to Garfield's pessimistic outlook on life, paired nicely with his boomer humor, and John being an extremely lonely fool. Odie and Lyman serve as characters to help aid the jokes and the momentum of the series. Odie provides Garfield with an immediate conflict in the cliche of cats versus dogs, and Lyman presents John another character to bounce off. When I was reading through the comics though, I noticed something odd. John's behavior. The only explanation for some of the events that happen are that John has schizophrenia. I began my research by reading all of the Garfield comics. This served multiple purposes. 1. It turned me into a Garfield expert. 2. It made me a big enough loser to think on the same plane as John Arbuckle. And 3. It caused me to have a deep-seated hatred for Mondays, which is the day that I'm going to release this video, and probably the last video I'll ever release. I gathered a lot of evidence from the comic strips, but before that, let's talk about the symptoms and behavior of schizophrenia. For this, I decided to both earn my medical degree and a doctorate in psychology. This was quite simple, seeing as all I needed to do was go to Mayo Clinic, WebMD, and YouTube. I have to give credit to the channel Osmosis for their video on schizophrenia. From these sites we were easily able to obtain a list of symptoms for schizophrenia. These include delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, abnormal motor function, lack of emotion, and in certain phases, reclusion. John displays all of these symptoms, but let's start off with the delusions.
Here it comes.
Shake your paw. Shake your paw.
Delusions are the most common of these behaviors that John displays. We can see him constantly talking to Garfield, Odie, and falling for the delusion that he has a chance with the vet Liz. He somehow manages to date Liz later in the series, but judging by John's character, I'm just going to call that bad writing. Come at me, Jim Davis. While his legal team prepares, I will continue with the video. We can see John in his everyday life talking with Garfield. He asks him about his feelings, asks him how he looks, and continues on with an almost infinite number of topics. Now, one might think that it's common for an owner to talk to their pets, but I think we can agree that asking your cat how he likes his coffee, asking him how you look, and making him an entire pasta dish to consume pushes the envelope. Not only this, but John also brings Garfield with him places. He brings Garfield camping at one point in the comics and even brings him on the first date with Liz. This was against John's wishes, seeing as how Garfield threatened him, but I think we are just piling problems on top of problems at this point. It appears that John believes Garfield is intelligent enough to have human-like qualities. However, John doesn't have enough evidence to justify this through his own perspective. As a third person, we can easily see the thoughts of both characters, and we know this. Let's move on to the next symptom, disorganized speech.
Whatever it was, I didn't do it, I didn't eat it, I don't know anything about it.
Garfield, my sheets and that thing, and the blanket, and it was there, and my pajamas.
We're having John closed captioned next week.
This is quite hard to portray in the comics. However, there are some scenes from the TV show, Garfield and Friends, that display this. However, this speech is only usually displayed when John is in some kind of distress. This is a very short segment, but there just isn't enough evidence in the comics that accurately displays this. However, this does not disprove the theory, just simply states he doesn't show this specific symptom. Now on to abnormal motor function.
All set.
When you're feeling down, here's something you can do to turn those.
John does show a few instances in the comics where he overdoes it. In multiple instances, Garfield will race across John's dinner table and devour his food. In this panel, John lifts his food up, but he does so at such speed his food flies into the air, completely ruining his meal. Our next piece of evidence happens in an episode of Garfield and Friends.
That's one.
John, Odie, and Garfield go fishing on the pier, and John is constantly falling off the pier, whilst Garfield protects it. Being a grade A klutz seems to be a character trait of his, similar to a basic white girl. Now on to lack of emotion.
just quite done yet.
Let's try the hurricane setting.
There are often times in the comic strip when something outrageous happens, and John seems completely desensitized to the situation. One of the best moments to display this is when Garfield begins to ride Odie like a horse. John's reaction to this is a completely flat expression with a cheap one-liner. This happens again to Lyman a few strips later. Lyman has a completely opposite and completely normal reaction. He acts shocked and goes to save Odie from his days of being a racehorse / punching bag.
I've made up my mind. I am not going to that auditorium tonight to wrestle that big lug.
A rare display of common sense.
That's the guy. That one there.
Hey!
We thought we'd give you a personal escort to the arena.
Help! Cry for help!
Wait for us. Oh, look, Odie. John's already practicing his wrestling holds.
One of John's biggest traits is his reclusion. John is shown to be a big loser throughout the entire series. He has no friends and will go out on the occasional date with Liz or some other girl. With the only exception to someone who can be considered his friend, Lyman, John really has no one else but Garfield and Odie. There are a whole series of comic strips where John will go camping by himself with Garfield and Odie. Along with this, he spends most of his days at home. Since he is a cartoonist, he doesn't need to go to work. The only human reaction he gets is with Lyman and Liz. There are almost zero interactions between John and new people throughout the entire series. Even Garfield himself will go out and interact with new cats, like that one time he went on a date with Arlene, or when he decided to go out and dish out Justice. I believe this is one of the biggest red flags John has in his collection of red flags, but there is only one bigger: John's hallucinations.
Please remember you are in Aisle K, Level 17, Blue Section.
Aisle K, level 17, blue.
Better write it down.
I know you think I should write it down, but when I get a fact in my head, you know what happens to it?
It dies of loneliness. Wave goodbye to the car, Odie. We'll never see it again as long as we live.
I've mentioned Lyman a few times throughout this video. One thing that gets the attention of most Garfield theorists out there is his disappearance after 1983. I have read a multitude of fan theories believing that John either kidnapped or murdered Lyman to keep Odie. This theory makes some sense as it explains the disappearance of Lyman and bolsters that with John and Odie's relationship. However, the creator has come out and said that Lyman joined the Peace Corps. Despite the Garfield company having constantly toyed with the theory, they have hinted at him being in John's basement, they have hinted at his murder, they have even showed Lyman locked up in John's basement in a spin-off browser game. Despite all this, there is a huge piece of evidence that disproves this theory. John Arbuckle is too stupid, too clumsy, and too weak to ever get away with a murder or kidnapping, especially when it's someone he lives with. That is the first place police would check if Lyman were to go missing. Not counting jokes and spin-off, I can find zero evidence of Lyman being murdered in the comic strips. There is no possible way John could leave no trace of a crime like that. With all of the evidence from before, we can make the wild assumption that Lyman is not real. Sounds out there, but things like this have happened before. John Nash was a famous mathematician that also had schizophrenia, and in his college dorm he met his first roommate who became his best friend. This went on for a while until after John Nash's diagnosis, when he realized that his roommate / best friend was never real. Now that we have a real-world example, it should be much easier to assume that John is the same. They even made a movie about John Nash called A Beautiful Mind. In it, John Nash is portrayed quite similar to John Arbuckle. John Nash, however, has a much more brilliant and likable person. These personality traits aren't, however, tied to a diagnosis. Either way, John Arbuckle is a big geek. If John was schizophrenic, it is very possible that his hallucination of Lyman did decide to join the Peace Corps and never crossed John Arbuckle's mind ever again. Now, even though we are at the end and we are still operating in if statements, that's only because I was holding on to one final piece of evidence. One final fact to set this theory in stone, and that fact is, cats don't talk. Now that we're at the end of the video, I guess I'm going to talk about future plans. Somebody came up to me with the question if I would do a live stream about Garfield lore, and just challenge people live, I guess. I don't know. But I thought about the idea. I think it would be better if everybody just left a comment and I'll do a Q&A of whatever Garfield questions that you have, since I am now a Garfield expert and I can put that on my resume and help everybody else who wants to know Garfield facts. Also, I have planned for my next video, possibly is going to be about how the Cat in the Hat represents the Cold War. And I'm talking about that movie from like 2000 something. I forget what year it is. It has Michael Myers as the cat. Everybody knows which one I'm talking about. Apparently, like the worst movie ever made. It's only bad because it's about the Cold War though, so it's cool. Now since this is my first video, I could probably assume that 100% of you guys are subscribed. So make sure to hit that subscribe button and hit that bell icon to get notified of when my Cat in the Hat theory video is going to come out.